Muchas gracias por estar aquí en este side event que hemos preparado con mucho cariño. Creemos que es un tema, el de la educación sexual integral, muy importante. No solo hoy justamente estábamos hablando, no es solo un tema de salud, no es solo un tema de educación, es un tema que hay que verlo como de forma integral. En el día de hoy intentaremos hablar un poco sobre cómo también, vincular todo el tema de la educación sexual integral en cómo se relaciona también con los discursos de odio y cómo nos puede ayudar a contrarrestar todos esos discursos de odio. Solo como para dar un poquito de estructura al evento y que todo el mundo sepa cómo va a funcionar. Empezaremos con 𝐻'𝐻'𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻 Bayori, que va a ser quien va a hacer un poco la introducción y la moderación del evento. Después tenemos a Dawn Minot, que ya va a ser nuestra keynote speaker. Y después tendremos 3 intervenciones de Diana, de Sara y de Toyin, que nos van a hablar un poquito sobre cómo algunas experiencias, nos van a hablar sobre sus experiencias en sus propias organizaciones sobre proyectos relacionados con la educación sexual integral. Y acabaremos con las conclusiones finales a nombre de Verónica Brown, de la coordinadora de Miss Robro. No tengo mucho más que decir, simplemente daros la bienvenida, introducir a nuestro primer invitado, que es 𝐻'𝐻'𝐻𝐻𝐻, que es quien va a hacernos la introducción principal y a moderar. Y 𝐻'𝐻'𝐻'𝐻 lo voy a hacer en inglés porque me lo presenté, mi nombre va a ir en inglés. 𝐻'𝐻'𝐻'𝐻 is the chairman of 𝐶ATESCO, the former Center for UNESCO of Catalonia. It's a civil society organization based in Barcelona, working to promote the values and programs of UNESCO and the UN system. So thank you, 𝐻'𝐻'𝐻'𝐻, so much for being here with us today. And I think we can start now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I've been asked to talk a little bit about comprehensive sexuality education. And I think a good way to start is with this document and that you might be familiar with. This is a document that was published in 2018 by 6 UN agencies, promoted, led by UNESCO, which is the agency for education, science, and culture, but together with UNAIDS, with the United Nations Population Fund that is here represented by Dawn, UNICEF, that is the agency for children's rights, UN Women, and the World Health Organization. I'm highlighting this precisely because it shows this wide aspect of what comprehensive sexuality education is. It's not by chance that they refer to sexuality education and not just sexual education. It's something wider, and I reproduce here these 8 big areas that the document deals with, precisely to understand what this comprehensive thing means. And you could see them, the interaction among them, and why they are relevant in a society, in a way that each one of them separately are not. There are, first of all, the area of relationships, how this the elements related with sexuality education affect families, friends, the creation of families, love, romantic relationships, elements related with tolerance, inclusion, and respect. We're going to talk about that later on hate speech, and questions related with parenting and commitment. Traditionally, many times, sexuality education had been focused basically on anatomy, sex, and reproduction. And this is much wider. How society is organized, how families are created, what happened with all that is around this. This is the first big area. The other big area is values, rights, culture, and sexuality. Many of these things are quite relevant because the comprehensive sexuality education, and again, that's why this guide that is wide on the promotion on these UN agencies is relevant because the restrictions that in many countries we are facing, I think that Sada is going to talk about this, are related with the idea of values. The idea that sexuality education is something that belongs to families. And therefore, it's something private that public institutions or society cannot deal with. And this is basically false for one main reason, because sexuality education is key for the interactions of humans with other humans. And those interactions have impact on the life of others. It's not something that happened in your life, in your bedroom. It's something that happened with your wide life. And that's why this part of values, rights, culture, and sexuality are so relevant. Then there is, but I'm not entering into each one of them. You could download this document on the internet. It's in several languages, translated in several languages. But I didn't want to forget that the part of human rights is particularly important because this comprehensive sexuality education includes forced child marriage, elements related with the right to divorce, many elements that are related mostly with the right of women to decide their own life. The third one is understanding gender, elements that are key related with sexual diversity, sexual identity, things that are key not just to accept or to tolerate or to live with the choices of others, but mostly to avoid something that is key in many countries, which is the violence that is linked with intolerance, something that is key. The fourth one, that is violence and staying safe, is everything that is key on empowering people to use all these elements with knowing how to deal with gender violence, how to deal with digital literacy related with rights, and questions basic on how to own your body and how to develop all this. The part of skills for health and well-being is something that had been much more focused on everything related with health, but there are things that are not just knowing the anatomy or the consequences of the reproductive elements, but also things related with communication, refusal, consent, decision making. Many of the things are key, and if education is the means to empower kids and young people to be able to make decisions, this part is also key. Then there is the human body and development, which is quite well known. The sexuality and sexual behavior, key. The culture of rape is still widespread in many societies. This is something that is not by chance, and educating people to identify this and to stop this or to avoid this to be developed is key. And finally, sexual and reproductive health that are not just related with pregnancy and pregnancy prevention. This is also an important part of the demographic part, but also how comprehensive sexual education is key to prevent and the idea of the comprehensive sexual education as a vaccine, as a prevention for other kind of things. So basically, talking about this, it's like the summary of what is comprehensive sexual education. I thought that was more useful to explain these four big areas. You could understand this is the definition that the document makes. This idea that is a curriculum-based process of teaching and learning is not something by chance. It's well structured. It deals with the cognitive, emotional, psychical, and social aspects, and it wants to equip children and young people for them to be able to thrive in life. And that's why this is something that cannot be private, because it deals with the capacity to interact in society. And it has these dimensions that were also highlighted in the document. Si pasamos a web. You see that the characteristics are, and again, I'm quoting the document, that are scientifically accurate, incremental. It means that at 8 and at 8 and at 12 and at 18, the learnings are different. They should be appropriate for age and development. Curriculum-based, it means that it's not by chance. It should be well-organized, comprehensive, based on gender equality, culturally relevant and context appropriate, based on human rights approach, transformative. It means it should transform people and societies, and able to develop all these skills to support healthy choices, healthy in the wider sense. Very important. All these elements together are key to avoid relativism. Relativism is probably the most dangerous enemy of comprehensive sexuality education. It means that anything goes. This is your opinion, I have another one. So the document was made not only by 6 UN agencies, but also based on the research of what works and what doesn't in different societies with different cultural backgrounds. It's key to understand this because when it talks about gender equality, it goes to a particular SDG. When it talks about human rights approach, it talks about human rights in all the world. When it talks about incremental age and developmentally appropriate, it talks about precisely what is appropriate for a kid that is 8 and what is appropriate for a kid that is 12. This deals mostly with the SDG on good health and well-being, which is SDG 3 and SDG 5 on gender equality, because the part of humanity that is most diminished by this lack of comprehensive education, sexuality education, is women all over the world, systematically in all societies, in all levels of societies. And finally, this is true SDG 4, which is education, not just education in school, but mostly education through compulsory process. And that's why it's relevant to avoid the relatives. And finally, let me highlight something that we are going to talk a little bit more at the end of the presentation, which is the link with hate speech. Hate speech, this is the definition that UN makes, is this idea that attacks or use pejorative or discriminatory language about a person or group on the basis of who they are. Many things that are related with identity of gender or gender identity are used for hate speech. I'm sure that in all your societies you have examples of this, and comprehensive sexuality education is a key element precisely to avoid all of this, not just for women, which is the biggest part of the population that is affected, but for people that have a different sexuality orientation and that heterosexuality, or for people that have other gender identity. And this is key because this hate speech leads to violence and to death. And in some countries, death that is politically structured. So you could be sent to a death penalty for your sexual identity or for your sexual orientation. And I think that I'm stopping here. Gracias. Thank you. Oh yeah, and I forget that I have also my hat of moderator. So I'm going to use the glasses to separate my identities. So we have the pleasure to have with us Dawn Minot, that is the Program and Technical Advisor of Gender at the United Nations Population Fund, which is one of the 6 agencies that promoted this document. And she also had 2 decades of experience in the UN system in gender and social development. In her role at the United Nations Population Fund, she focused on advancing gender equality through the provision of technical assistance, capacity development, and strategic partnership. And we asked her to be our keynote speaker, and we thank you very much for your kindness of coming and for your work.
Great. Thank you, Edward, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. Just checking if those in the very back can hear me. Yes. Excellent. Good. All right. So as you've heard, my name is Dawn Minot. I am with the United Nations Population Fund, and I'm going to do something a little bit different in my talk with you today. I believe in the power of the arts. And oftentimes we can communicate a lot of what we want to say through policies and programs, through drumming, through poetry, through dancing, that can actually resonate with the heart in ways that our policy statements cannot. So we're going to go on a journey today. One of my favorite number is the number 3. And I like the number 3 for a number of reasons. One, whether you look across different forms of religion, 3 is embedded there. Whether it be the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, or spirit, soul, and body, there's the connections of 3. It symbolizes creation, expression, completeness, and spiritual insight. So for my presentation with you today, we're going to go on a journey in 3 parts. So as I'm going through, I hope you can find each of those 3 parts. In addition to that, when I close, it will be through recommendations, and there will be how many recommendations? Catch on really fast. I like that. So I'm going to start with a poem. It's a very simple poem. The poetic form is called a haiku. Anybody know what a haiku is? Yes. Excellent. Okay, so a haiku is by syllables. 5, then 7, then 5. Okay, so health, rights, and voices, if we are on slide 2. Okay. Health, rights, and voices. Past, present, future aligned. 3 truths light the way. Looking back, the journey so far. We're going back to over 30 years ago, when we had the program of action for the ICPD, which is the International Conference on Population and Development in 1994, and the platform for action from the 4th World Conference on Women in 1995. And both of those outcome frameworks were pivotal and bold for their time. We should be on the next slide by now, 3rd slide. So both of these frameworks put together gender equality and women's empowerment squarely in the global agenda. These frameworks established a people-centered approach, recognizing a core truth that a woman's control over her fertility is vital to all other rights. And this vision still drives the 2030 agenda's call for universal sexual reproductive health and rights. So for that reason, the context of your comprehensive sexuality education conversation today, I'm going to focus my talk on sexual reproductive health, the challenges that we're seeing, and how we can move that forward, particularly as we're looking at the looming dates for the SDGs to be achieved, which is less than 5 years from now in 2030. Sexual reproductive health and rights is not a side issue. It's crucial to SDG 5, which is on gender equality. It is crucial to SDG 3 on health. Access to sexual reproductive health services such as contraception, maternal health, comprehensive sexuality education, these all empower women and girls to make informed choices. And when they're able to do this, the results are better health, improved economic opportunities, and a stronger societal voice for women and girls. As we'll see on the next slide, over these 30 years, we've made really good strides. Globally, maternal deaths are down by 34%, and modern contraception use has doubled. Another noteworthy progress is measured by an SDG indicator, which might be very familiar to you all, SDG indicator 5.6.1. And this indicator measures the proportion of partnered women who are able to make decisions, their own decisions, about their sexual reproductive health decisions, which in other words have bodily autonomy. And the data tells us that 56% of women who are partnered can now make these decisions on their own. On the next slide, although we have made much progress, this progress is uneven. And there are big challenges that still remain. Maternal deaths have stalled, and excess inequalities persist. Earlier, I identified that 56% of partnered women being able to decide on their own about their sexual reproductive health choices was a plus. Well, what that means is that 44% of women cannot make decisions on their own about when to have sex, how many children they should have, or what contraception choices they have. And tragically, a woman dies every 2 minutes due to pregnancy or childbirth-related causes. In this day and age, no woman should die given life. Sexual reproductive health inequalities are stark. Maternal mortality decline has stagnated, even rising in some regions. And when we take an intersectional lens and look at these challenges, including from a race and geographic standpoint, we still see that these outcomes are even further retracted. Women in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, are 130 times more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth-related causes than those in Europe or North America. And Afro-descendant women often face obstetric mistreatment. It is critical, therefore, for us to prioritize those furthest behind when we are designing our programs and delivering our services. For this, strong national data systems are necessary. Therefore, investing in the collection and the analysis of data, and not just data, but data that is disaggregated by markers such as age, race, ethnicity, disability, and sexual orientation, this is essential to fix inequalities blocking progress towards achieving the goals of the SDG, which, as I said before, is only 5 years. We're less than 5 years from now. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the current shifts in the global health architecture and really how we need to confront the impact of these global trends on sexual reproductive health and rights. One of the things that we're seeing is rapid demographic shifts that are fueling population anxieties and policies that try to control fertility, often doing so by undermining human rights. However, what is required is a shift from controlling fertility to empowering individuals to freely decide on the timing, the spacing, and the number of the children that they would like to have. We also see growing humanitarian crises. This is also a threat because in order for us to integrate SRH and gender-based violence programming, these must be done in all of our humanitarian responses. We must focus on local and women-led organizations and working across the continuum of humanitarian development and peace-responsive actions. I don't need to emphasize too much that the digital revolution is upon us. Every person right here, right now, can testify to that. With it, we see digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, offering unprecedented opportunities to accelerate gender equality and to achieve our SRHR goals. Our collective priority must be effective to leverage these powerful tools to deliver a more equitable and healthier future for all. Moreover, we talk about the digital divide, and within this realm, it also presents new frontiers for harm. Technology-facilitated gender-based violence, from online harassment to the non-consensual sharing of images, is also a growing concern. This is creating unsafe online spaces that deter women's full participation in the online world. And at UNFPA, we are working to actively leverage partnerships and innovate strategies to combat these evolving forms of violence, working towards safer digital environments for women and girls. On the next slide, this brings me really to a critical challenge, which is a powerful, organized pushback against human rights, against gender equality, and against comprehensive sexuality education. This pushback, unlike a few years ago, is far more organized, well-coordinated, transnational, happening in every space, and its efforts has been driven by conservative political and anti-rights groups that infiltrate processes using oftentimes dis- and misinformation to push anti-rights and anti-gender agendas. This pushback has evolved in the sense that we've seen an alarming shift to sophisticated online campaigns. This is often hidden, but the global system drives it, using online gaming, various influencers, and algorithms favoring extreme content. Crucially, this pushback involves a systematic tactic to silence online advocates through the use of gender-based violence that is facilitated by technology. By this, we see that it's a targeting of women in political positions and women as human rights defenders, often through online harassment and disinformation campaigns. And this underscores what I've heard my most recent executive director, and I say most recent because our executive director has changed since yesterday, but since yesterday indeed, but in the remarks that she said as she was exiting UNFPA, she made the link between online actions, which we would categorize as URL, to IRL, in real world. In real world, or in real life, rather, in real life, IRL. And in essence, it's just talking about this continuum of online violence to the real world experience. So at UNFPA, we recognize the gravity of this comprehensive pushback, and our programs are directly responding to it. So for example, we have a program called Empowered, which is a CSE program funded by the Government of Canada. And we're integrating digital literacy into our CSE program, helping young people to identify harmful online content. And through another program called Making All Spaces Safe, we're establishing secure communication platforms for women-led organizations and civil society organizations. We're also investing in training to enhance safety and security protocols for women survivors of technical facilitated gender-based violence and organizations that support them. Amidst these challenges, powerful cross-movement activism is rising. We also see Indigenous women are leading environmental justice, linking this to reproductive autonomy. We see young activists fighting for climate justice. So it's therefore strategic for us to support these movements, as sexual reproductive health justice is tied to broader social justice struggles. Now on the way forward, looking to the next 5 years. So I'd like to put before you 3 recommendations as a way forward. And that should be on a slide, I hope. Yes, good. So the first is working together. With pushback and shrinking budgets, it is imperative that we collaborate. It's important for us to abandon silos, to pool our resources instead, and to work more closely. So UNFPA greatly values our collaboration, especially with FOSS Feminista, who is an organizer of this event. One of the things I can reflect on was as recent as a couple of months ago, well, actually since March. Time is moving so fast, it's actually been more than a couple of months. But with FOSS Feminista, one of our key partners, we did a symposium at the CSW, which resulted in a solidarity statement endorsing the value of SRH and gender equality and keeping the need to push that forward. Already we have over 100 partners who have signed on to this solidarity statement, including member states, and we're working now to bring that to a launch. Similarly, we greatly value our collaboration with UNESCO, as mentioned by the presentation before mine, on our work on the CSE work. So now more than ever, we need to hold our partners close and build bridges across areas where we continue to do our work. And that in itself is an exercise of our agency in these troubling times. The second recommendation is around working with non-traditional partners and working in non-traditional spaces. And that's why I started with poetry, because some of our non-traditional partners are also those who work with the arts. So it's fitting also for us to be in the Church Center, because the Church Center is the hub for religious and non-governmental organizations that are engaged in international advocacy, especially around issues of peace, human rights, gender equality, and social justice. So we know that many anti-right movements stem from flawed interpretations of religion and tradition. So to counter this, we must engage traditional and faith-based leaders to dispel these myths. This strategy can counter the broader pushback against gender equality and sexual reproductive health and rights. My third and final recommendation is for us to safeguard SRHR in the digital space. This space is in many ways a battleground where data is weaponized and disinformation thrives. We must urgently protect individuals' SRHR data. This means digital literacy for young people against harmful online content and a proactive stand against technology-facilitated gender-based violence and anti-rights recruitment. Critical to this objective is digital platforms being held accountable for their role. In closing, the journey for SRHR is not over. But by working together with accountability, with renewed commitment, and enough resources, we can build a more just, equitable world for everyone. So I encourage us to seize this moment to renew our promise and to make the ICPD and Beijing platforms visions of reality for every woman and every girl everywhere. And as I say, every girl, I want to recognize who I think is the youngest person in this audience and may very well be a 10-year-old, I don't know. She's 9. Almost at 10. So for UNFPA, the 10-year-old girl is key to who we are. So young lady, what is your name?
Oh, wow.
Can you stand up so we can hear you? Asante? Azani. Azani, we salute you. And we're happy to have you in this space because the work that we do is to make the future better for you as you grow up. Okay, so thank you for being here. So in closing, we're going to go back to poetry. And I'm going to close off with another haiku. What's a haiku again? Syllables of?
5, 7, 5.
United in stride. United in stride. Through data, dialogue, trust, we uphold all rights. Thank you. Basiero.
Thank you very much, Dan. I think that is thank you for the presentation and for the work. This organized pushback is good to remember that it's properly organized and that in all our societies we are facing this in one way or another, and that international multilateral organizations, the UN system, is key to help us to fight back this organized pushback. It's the only way that we have to have legitimacy and well-structured answer for this. So thank you for the work. And we are now moving to 3 examples that are gonna give us different colors on the work that we are doing in comprehensive sexuality education. And the first one is about the program 𝐶𝐞𝐲𝐻 in Catalonia. And Diana Cardona is going to present it. She is the advocacy officer from l'Associació de Drets Sexuals i Reproductius, an association working on sexual and reproductive rights, a community-based organization that works in Catalonia to achieve structural and lasting changes that advance the SRHR through direct care, knowledge generation, professional training and support, and political advocacy. And Diana is going to talk about the case of implementing this comprehensive sexuality education in Catalonia through the program that they developed. Diana.
Gracias. Thanks. So after this brief introduction by our 2 experts, I'll start the part where the civil society organizations share their thoughts, pero lo voy a hacer en castellano porque me siento bastante más cómoda hablando en castellano y un poco más fluida. Entonces, si alguien no tiene, if somebody doesn't understand Spanish, they can go up there. Thank you. Bueno, pues gracias por estar aquí. Desde la asociación queremos explicar un poco el recorrido y los desafíos de la implementación de la educación sexual integral, que la voy a llamar 𝐿𝐸, ¿vale? Porque si tengo que decir educación sexual integral todo el rato, pues va a ser un poco más largo, porque lo voy a hacer muchas veces. Pues de la implementación de la 𝐿𝐸 en Cataluña, ¿no? También queremos destacar que la 𝐿𝐸 es una herramienta poderosa y transformadora contra los discursos de odio, como ya se ha puntualizado, y los grupos antigénero. Presentaré el caso del programa 𝐶𝐞𝐲𝐻. It's not working. Oh, yeah. Como un ejemplo también de tensión social y resistencia, ¿no? Y como evidencia de la necesidad de políticas públicas transformadoras. Como ya ha comentado Eduard, nos hemos respaldado en las propuestas de la UNESCO y de la OMS que promueven la implementación de la 𝐿𝐸 pues, basada en derechos, en evidencia científica y perspectiva de género. Así, el programa que os voy a presentar incorpora todas las dimensiones necesarias para educar en un acercamiento positivo y responsable de la sexualidad. Vale. ¿Por qué hablamos? Empezamos un poco por el inicio, que muchas de vosotras seguramente os lo sabéis, pero voy a hacer así como una breve introducción. ¿Por qué hablamos de invisibilización de la educación sexual? Bueno, pues hasta 2019 la 𝐿𝐸 era prácticamente un tabú dentro de las instituciones catalanas, como dentro de todas las instituciones, o en casi todas las instituciones, especialmente dentro del Departamento de Educación, ¿no? La influencia de organizaciones religiosas en muchas escuelas significaba el predominio obvio de un discurso como moralista y bastante represivo en este sentido, ¿no? Hago un poco de memoria histórica de lo complicado que ha sido el acercamiento a la educación sexual y cuáles han sido los 3 modelos históricos de eso, ¿no? de acercamiento, ¿no? En primer lugar, ¿qué tenemos? La abstinencia obligatoria. no tenga relaciones sexuales fuera del matrimonio. Bueno, después que tenemos la idea del sexo como peligro, ¿no? La educación basada todo el rato en el riesgo, ¿no? El VIH, los embarazos no deseados. Y por último, que yo creo que estamos en este contexto, como mínimo en el caso de Cataluña, el sexo como violencia, ¿no? Educación sexual introducida solo a través de las problemáticas, ¿no? Violencia sexual, algunos acercamientos a la pornografía. El resultado que tenemos, pues la ESI ha estado siempre centrada en el miedo como narrativa principal, ¿no? Con un enfoque preventivo mucho más que con un enfoque empoderador. Entonces, siguiente. Oh, no, esta es esta. En contra de esto y frente a estos modelos tradicionales y no tan tradicionales, o sea, continúan siendo estos modelos que he contado antes actuales, nosotras defendemos una educación sexual feminista, sobre todo con un enfoque en derechos sexuales y reproductivos, ¿no? Esto tiene que promover, yo sé que os lo sabéis, pero os lo voy a volver a contar, un enfoque biopsicosocial integral de la sexualidad. Tiene que promover el placer, la dignidad, la autonomía corporal, las relaciones saludables y la inclusión, muy importante, de las dimensiones emocionales, comunicativas y afectivas, ¿no? Eso es que no solamente se hable de sexo. ¿Por qué? Porque el objetivo final, como comentaban mis compañeras antes, de esta perspectiva que contempla la educación sexual como un derecho en sí mismo, ¿no? O sea, se basa en la construcción de relaciones sanas, libres de violencia y de desigualdad y fomentan una ciudadanía crítica, ¿no? Ahí está el punto en el que también estamos basando este 𝐶𝐵, pero en el que nos basamos todas, ¿no? Como ya he comentado, ahora sí que pasamos, hasta el 2019 la ESI, bueno, estaba prácticamente ausente de la acción gubernamental catalana y internacional, podría decir, pero una nueva administración autonómica nos llamó a la puerta y nos encargó oficialmente a la Asociación de Derechos Sexuales y Reproductivos el diseño de una propuesta para implementar la ESI en las escuelas catalanas. Nuestras caras de sorpresa y de ilusión y de ganas y de motivación no tenían comparación, ¿no? Esta, ya que nos lo pedían a nosotras y no a otra organización, estaba basada en la adaptación de estas guías técnicas que ha dicho Eduard, de la UNESCO y de otros estándares de las Naciones Unidas, y sería una etapa adaptada a todas las etapas educativas obligatorias, ¿no? Desde los 3 hasta los 16 años. Vamos con todo. Vale, a ver la siguiente. Aquí, a ver, sí. Bueno, aquí vemos un poco lo que ha presentado antes Eduard de las 8 dimensiones, nosotros lo reducimos en 6. Y aquí vemos los materiales desarrollados que podéis encontrar completos y muy extensos en la web de la asociación. O sea, todo esto que escribimos está en nuestra web. Y también, bueno, ahí al final vais a poder ver unas tarjetas donde vais a tener el QR, donde podéis encontrar toda la info. Bueno, en este caso estructurábamos el aprendizaje en itinerarios y en objetivos y temas por edad, elaborábamos diferentes dosieres específicos y lo más importante es que lo redactamos en catalán, pero lo traducimos al castellano y al inglés, para que lo tomen y lo adapten y lo utilicen como quieran. Y esto está gratis en nuestra web, pueden descargárselo. Bueno, pues estábamos muy motivadas y cuando todo parecía ir bien, problemas. Parecía ir bien. Sí, pues estamos acostumbradas igual, ¿no? Todo parecía ir bien de una manera bastante ilusoria, ¿no? Aquí empezamos con la primera denuncia mediática ilegal, no ilegal, sino legal, al programa por parte de abogados cristianos, ¿no? Que se define, voy a abrir quotes, ¿vale? Se define como una asociación jurídica que actúa en defensa de los principios cristianos tradicionales, principalmente a través de acciones legales en España. Y cierro la quote. Básicamente utilizan el sistema judicial para hacer su activismo ideológico, ¿no? En este caso, y apuntando al programa 𝐶𝐞𝐻, que es nuestra adaptación de las bases de la UNESCO y de la OMS, nos acusaban de fomentar la masturbación infantil, entre otras perlas. Nos acusaban a la asociación, ¿no? A este programa. Y esto, yo creo que, a ver si pasas uno, vamos a poder ver así como algunas noticias que... Esto fue una denuncia legal, esto son noticias del periódico, pero fue una denuncia legal. Entonces, bueno, aquí hablando de la Asociación de Derechos Sexuales y del Centro Joven, propone explorar la masturbación en la infancia como un hecho normalizado y un ejercicio de placer. Spoiler, sí. Pero bueno, digamos que la interpretación que hicieron pues, no era la que nosotras estábamos, digamos, intentando implementar, ¿no? También ese mismo año, puedes volver atrás si quieres, nos encontramos con una situación bastante complicada en la que la pandemia pues, generó debilidad política y pocas ganas de implementar proyectos que para el gobierno no eran tan prioritarios, ¿no? Como el 𝐤'EDUCAT. Y otra de las grandes campañas en contra del programa y en contra de la educación sexual en general, y avivada por el partido de extrema derecha español, fue el PIN parental, ¿no? Una medida propuesta por sectores conservadores que permitía a las familias autorizar o vetar la participación de sus hijos en actividades complementarias en la escuela, ¿no? Especialmente en aquellas relacionadas con la educación afectivo-sexual, la diversidad de género, la igualdad, los derechos LGTB, etc. Vale. Ay, perdón, voy a hablar un poco más lento, perdón. Bueno, así pues, los cambios de gobierno y la falta de voluntad política, así como el miedo y la adopción de una postura conservadora por parte de los gobiernos de izquierdas que nos habían pedido esta propuesta, y frente a los ataques de la ultraderecha y los grupos antigénero, esto supuso la paralización del programa 𝐤'EDUCAT, ¿no? Y de toda esta perspectiva de educación sexual en Cataluña. Vale, la realidad actual... ¿A bien pueden pasar? Bueno, la siguiente, esto es lo... este es como los papelitos que entregaba Vox en las escuelas de Cataluña. Vox es el partido de extrema derecha español. Bueno, en contra del programa 𝐤'EDUCAT, ¿no? Ya está, podemos pasar. Gracias. La realidad actual es que la 𝐸SI no es obligatoria, su implementación depende de la iniciativa de cada escuela y de cada docente, o sea, esto implica un acceso desigual y normalmente siempre queda relegada a horas o de tutoría o de patio o de libre elección, ¿no? Todavía estamos muy lejos de una implementación real. Y también quería poner sobre la mesa que ahora el actual gobierno está proponiendo una consulta pública con las familias sobre si incorporar o no la educación sexual en las escuelas. Pero no estamos de acuerdo con esto. Rechazamos esta propuesta no porque no queramos implementar la educación sexual, sino porque creemos que es un error metodológico, ¿no? Y de fondo y político. Los derechos humanos, y como derechos sexuales y reproductivos son derechos humanos, no se someten a un debate, ¿no? O sea, no se hace con otras asignaturas y aprendizajes. Entonces, ¿por qué con la educación sexual integral se está proponiendo un debate o se está proponiendo una consulta pública de implementación o no, ¿no? Bueno, así como resumen, vinculando todo lo explicado con la cuestión de los discursos de odio, nuestro enfoque es que la educación sexual es la puerta de entrada directa al discurso basado en derechos, ¿no? Eso es porque promueve relaciones positivas, por eso hablamos de integral, ¿no? Contrarias completamente a los discursos de odio, ¿no? También sabemos que desafía y desmantela estos discursos, pues ¿con qué? Con información veraz, desmiente mitos, combate, bueno, eso, ¿no? Combate la desinformación e introduce valores democráticos y feministas, ¿no? O sea, este concepto de integral es porque fomenta el pensamiento crítico frente a las narrativas antigénero que son totalmente contrarias. Bueno, tenemos que entender la 𝐸SI como una herramienta estructural de transformación social y por eso genera tantísima resistencia. Aunque suene, ya que hemos utilizado poesía y aunque suene muy prosaico, creemos que la educación sexual es el antídoto contra la polarización social, ¿no? O sea, es el muro de contención frente al retroceso de derechos. Y aprovecho un poco the floor, ¿cómo se llama? La palabra, ¿no? The floor, y teniendo en cuenta que tenemos también aquí entre nosotros representantes del gobierno catalán, para manifestar la necesidad urgente de implementar esta educación sexual, ¿no? Como política pública. Esto requiere, obviamente, de voluntad y de asignación presupuestaria, obvio, y esto lo hablábamos antes con los compañeros de 𝐤'EDUCAT, que el cambio será gradual. O sea, el cambio generacional no se logrará en una sola legislación. Esto no ha pasado nunca con la educación sexual, ¿no? Pero es una correcta implementación supondrá este freno del que estamos hablando constantemente, este freno a las narrativas antigénero y a la extrema derecha, que ya es real en nuestros contextos, ¿no? Tenemos, bueno, lo que está pasando en Murcia, lo que está pasando con los gobiernos autonómicos del PP, con Vox, y aunque estemos en un momento complicado, creemos, porque nunca perdemos la esperanza, no sé por qué, creemos que hay una creemos que hay una ventana de oportunidad muy estratégica ahora mismo, ¿no? O sea, en estos momentos de fuerte polarización y de fuertes diferencias y del aumento de los discursos de odio, la educación sexual puede ser un eje transformador. Nos lo tenemos que plantear como tal. Y puede marcar esta diferencia, ¿no? Es una herramienta para avanzar en derechos y que nos permite estar fuertes y convencidas y preparadas frente a estos discursos de odio y antigénero que ya existen, ¿no? Existen en todos nuestros contextos. Y aquí termino. Muchas gracias por la atención.
Good job, Tiana. That was great.
Thank you very much. I think that is, but let me highlight something that Diana was mentioning, this progressive thing. Yesterday I was at the New York Historical, which is a museum that talks about the history of New York and the United States. And there is one picture of women from the Mormon Church in the 19th century demonstrating against the restriction of polygamy, so the right of men to have several wives. And that was I think that this is quite linked, because when talking about comprehensive sexuality education, we forget that we are talking about the most rooted cultural element that had been systematically discriminating women or people that are not basically with male cis identity focus in the last 7,000 years. So it's something quite rooted in literature, in social structures, in all power structures, in narrative of most religions, etc. So when talking about comprehensive sexuality education, we have to understand that people that are in government, people that are in schools, people that are in the judiciary system, or people that are in media have always had this kind of a ground for the absence of comprehensive sexuality education. And that's why this is something that should be progressive in the sense of penetrating the whole system. And that's why the work, both the one that is being done at the UN system and the one that institutions like 𝐶𝐴 are so relevant. And on the other extreme, we have the example that Sara Martinez is going to explain. Sara is the programs coordinator at Reproductius, Global South-led transnational feminist alliance working towards the realization of sexual and reproductive justice. And she's going to discuss, or she's going to explain the ground experiences from different global South contexts in which comprehensive sexual education has been under attack, mainly using family values, protectionism, and anti-gender narratives. So the idea that has been all the life like this. Why are you trying to do it otherwise? Sarah, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting research to be in this space and to share some of the work that we have done around CSE through our advocacy, through thought leadership, as a pillar in our movement building. We have been doing this for a while. Research is a membership-based organization. We have members in different parts of the world in Global South countries. And we wanted to share with you some of the experiences that our members are sharing with the Alliance so that we can know what the context is in the Global South. So Dawn is going to be super happy because we're working with 3 different contexts for this presentation that have a very different understanding or techniques in which sexual education, comprehensive sexual education, has been under attack by anti-rights. So we will first start talking about Costa Rica. As our member from Costa Rica this is all gathered by the members, no? So this is just me sharing what the members have told the Alliance. I am not from Costa Rica, I am from Mexico. I will talk about my country later, so bear with me. But anyway, just to put you up to speed of what is going on in Costa Rica, this year, in 2025, the government of Costa Rica, in the beginning of the year, that was in January, decided to eliminate comprehensive sexuality education and the affectivity education program and replace it with a so-called peace and coexistence education program. The Minister of Education stated, and I am going to quote, that this new program is aligned with the values of our society and ensures that students have received comprehensive sexual education without ideological bias or erotic instruction. So this is the packing that they did around the elimination of the program. erotic instruction, and basically the perversion of young children. The government is now insisting that sexual education should be an exclusive responsibility of the family, the parents, despite civil society coming together and flagging together with academics that this could lead to inequality in access to education, to reliable evidence-based information, and this could lead to the spread of misinformation and other negative effects. In line with this approach, the government also decided to eliminate the anti-bullying protocol for LGBTIQ+ students, arguing that it privileged these students over others, saying that these rights have gone too far and now they have more privileges than other students. As part of the things that have been going on, and as a form of resistance, 𝐥𝐶EDER, which is a civil society organization, a grassroots organization from Costa Rica, stated that eliminating CSE and anti-bullying protocol would have harmful impacts, and naming them all, like teenage pregnancy in the rise, bullying in the rise, sexual abuse and sexual violence in the rise. And they argue that neither the program or the protocol contained an actual ideological bias, but instead eliminated them clearly was part of pushing an ideology that sought to roll back social progress that had been made over the last years, to attack children and to attack adolescents, and further deepen the crisis in education and violence in the country. So besides doing this, they also, 𝐥𝐶EDER also petitioned the Ministry of Public Education to provide all the documentation that led to this decision to eliminate these programs, including any technical studies and legal justifications for this action. And also to provide the studies on the impact that this elimination would have on teenage pregnancy, on sexually transmitted infections, and domestic violence, as well as the impact of eliminating the protocol and on the response to cyberbullying and physical, material, psychological, verbal, and sexual bullying. The Ministry of Education, I'm going to spoil you this story, did not respond this request to information, and 𝐥𝐶EDER filed an appeal for constitutional protection. And the Constitutional Court ordered the Public Education Ministry to detail the reasons that motivated this elimination. To this day, this information has not been shared. So since January, I'm going to say activists and civil society organizations have worked together to put out advocacy guides in support to comprehensive sexuality education, to publish them in Costa Rica. They have done community dialogues that have been facilitated, and they have, and institutional channels have been used to defend the rights of students, to also talk about the implications of this elimination in general for the rights of young people. Additionally, they have done some informational campaigns that have been launched on social media, mainly, and other public education efforts that have been coordinated in both urban and rural areas, inside and outside the greater metropolitan area. But it is not only civil society that has opposed this elimination of comprehensive sexual education, but the Ombudsperson Office has been a key actor and a relevant actor and an ally, because they published a report urging the Ministry of Education not to eliminate the Comprehensive Sexuality and Affectivity Program. And it maintains the ministry's own technical teams concluded that the new program does not replace or meet the objectives that were eliminated with the previous one, as key topics such as sexual health, diversity, gender identity, and sexual and reproductive rights have been excluded. The report that the Ombudsperson Office did emphasizes that comprehensive sexuality education is a human right, that it cannot be contested as a human right, that it is recognized in international bodies such as the Committee on the Rights of the Child, CEDAW, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, and that the removal of the program is a violation of international commitments made by the state of Costa Rica. So together with this office and civil society organizations, they have called together for participation of experts and human rights organizations in decision-making processes regarding comprehensive sexuality education to ensure that the rights of students are guaranteed. So this is one of the first contexts in which we can see clearly that the state is basically deploying the attacks against comprehensive sexual education. They are the ones orchestrating them with this elimination of the program and refusing to respond or to give any sort of rationale of why this elimination happened. But this is not the case for every single country in the Global South, which leads us to a second case, which is the case of Rwanda. And this is a case of where the state is not deploying the attacks, but is tolerant to attacks by anti-right groups to comprehensive sexual education. So Rwanda is a case of systemic, structural, and government-tolerated anti-rights and anti-gender approach to CSE and sexual and reproductive health and rights broadly and generally. In Rwanda, there are some existing laws and policies that support CSE. It's that institutional and that legal background that protects it very broadly, we will say. And at the same time, there is a context of teenage pregnancies and gender-based violence and rape that continue to be on the rise in the country generally. So Rwanda adopted sexuality education without the first C, without it being actually comprehensive. So a sexuality education school curriculum for upper primary and secondary schools in 2017. This was meant to be implemented in all public schools, and it was an attempt to address the lack of sexuality education, basically. However, the context in Rwanda is that 50% of public and primary and secondary schools and public health centers are managed by the Catholic Church. This means this sexuality program cannot be actually implemented. There is a backlash right there and then, and that any sexual and reproductive health or services or information is not provided. So civil society organizations have come together, have attempted to have the CSE curriculum that is more comprehensive to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. But the backlash is coming from religious groups based in the control that they have over these health centers and these schools, like basically blocking the implementation of this actual program and for it to actually be even talked about, I would say. All these initiatives have been shut down. This has led civil society organizations to try to organize in a different way to try to cross that block that's there. So there was, in 2019, there was a bill to reduce the age of accessibility to sexual and reproductive health and rights services for folks that were below 18 years old without any parental consent. And this also faced very numerous backlashes from religious groups. However, the government has moved to the table the bill, and if approved, challenges in its implementation, given the religious systemic barriers, will still remain. So what have civil society organizations done in Rwanda is basically holding community dialogues. That has been one of the main things that they have done. And they are meant to tackle the disinformation around the effects of comprehensive sexuality education and the misconceptions that exist based on religious ideas. And they have also worked together with youth-led groups to share CSE information through unconventional channels, we would say, which is basically social media. So this is to give us an idea of what things can be done as we move from one context to another, especially now that the geopolitics and the politics in general of the world are changing. And we really want to highlight that even though the context can be different for us, we have strategies that bind us together as civil society, but also that we can learn from others, from other strategies. So then we move forward to another different context, which is the case of Mexico, which is my country, which is very weird for me to be speaking and saying that Mexico is an ally. It's very weird. This is new. This is how we move, and this is how the world moves. But it does have its challenges, no? Even though we're working with them as an ally. So I won't go back and share all of the context in Mexico, but basically Mexico is a very Catholic country. A lot of things that were said about Catalonia are the same for Mexico. There's a lot of religious groups that are challenging comprehensive sexuality education. We also had the PIN parental, the parental PIN, as an initiative that was actually imported from Spain. because of our connections, I guess, our colonial connections. But because of the work that civil society organizations and activists have worked together, in 2019, there was a constitutional reform that included sexual education as a constitutional right in Mexico. Notice there is no C there. There is no comprehensive part of it that was contested. And the only thing that we could get actually in the Constitution is comprehensive sexual education. This means that the work is still not over. But as the government in Mexico changed and we now have I'm going to say, leftist government in place, this has changed a lot because that means there are also many people who were part of this movement of recognizing sexual education as a constitutional right now being part of the government. So in 2023, the public education ministry changed the entire public education curriculums to emphasize and to prioritize a more humanistic and holistic approach to education, which is called La Nueva Escuela Mexicana. And this change, amongst other things, included the increase in comprehensive sexuality education contents in public schools and the free public books that are handed out to any Mexican kid that goes to public school. We have those. We've had them for a while now. So anti-rights, namely la Asociación Nacional de Padres de Familia, the Family Part Association, that would be the name in English, did not waste any time to challenge this change, mainly in the books, saying that the curriculum was a way to make younger people dumb, to promote the communist agenda, and I am quoting here, and to pervert children and youth, teaching them about sex with graphic images. So this is why we have the meme of like the communist phantom like luring around the public schools in Mexico. They made a lot of critiques around the fact that there was no consultation or like a consultation process to guide these changes. And this led them to get a court appeal for constitutional protection, forcing the stopping of the printing of these books. So Mexico is divided by states. There are some states that are governed by the opposition. All of the governments from the opposition-controlled states decided not to give out any of these textbooks, even though they're free, even though they are like the main source of education for people who attend public schools. They decided to not print them out, not hand them out, saying that there were some errors around math problems or around history, like not even mentioning mainly comprehensive sexuality education, but other things. And they allied themselves with academics who were a little bit more friendlier toward the opposition to flag these inconsistencies or like little mistakes there, to say that this was a barbaric thing, that this would set back education in Mexico for like decades and stuff. So I won't go deeper into this, but just so you can have the picture, the coordinator of the National Action Party, which is the opposition party in Mexico in the Congress, went as far as to say all parents should like burn the books, should at least take out any of the pages that are perverting the children so that they are not like going around being dumb and being communist. So he went on like, like rip the books, and it was very funny. But what we have done as civil society organizations mainly was something that we have never done before, which is to recognize the state as our allies, but also to recognize other academics and experts as allies. What we did was get together and sort of do some reading of the books, defend why the books were good, why they like implemented comprehensive sexuality education, and why they were a good starting point towards this. But this has also led to us being in a very weird role of we're your allies, but we still want to critique some of the things that are there, no? Because there was a change in the curriculum, there is a change in the books, which is great, but we still have the problem of implementation and capacity building for the actual teachers that are going to implement that comprehensive sexual education because it is not there. So one of the things that we actually did do too was to showcase the work that we had done with young people and to bring about how young people were a lot more engaged in classrooms when we were talking about comprehensive sexuality education topics, and how that would also be a way to, I guess, incentivize people to stay in school because it was fun, because it was engaging, because they might want to stay just because they want to be there, no, not because they are forced. So all of this to say that mainly in three conclusions is one, that opposition to CSE continues to be a political exchange, an exchange currency mainly aimed at pleasing conservative constituencies in electoral calculations. This has been done this way, and all of this responded to that. And our opportunity here is to center that education cannot be an exchange currency. The second conclusion would be that there is one main tool that we have used, which is tackling misinformation and highlighting the interlinkages between comprehensive sexual education and the prevention of teenage pregnancy, sexual abuse, and children and youth, and any oppression or control towards feminized bodies, especially, and using autonomy as a counter-argument to say that comprehensive sexual education is a way to achieve bodily autonomy. And the third conclusion is that civil society organizations and activists have had different ways in which, they have faced different contexts in which anti-rights organize and counter comprehensive sexuality education. But this means that there are also a lot of different resistance tools and strategies, that there is no one recipe to counter anti-rights, to counter hate speech, but rather that we have to strategize and see what the context is to learn from others, and know that to every strategy the anti-rights are using, we will have a new way to resist. So I just want to leave us with that hopeful note. And thank you so much for inviting.
Thank you, Sarah. When watching these beaters, we laugh a little bit, but we are in a context where the same place that I told you, the New York Historical, has an exhibition of what happened here in the 30s, 40s, and 50s on prosecuting people for communism and censoring movies and making playwrights censored on their work. And we are now with a public administration here that is prosecuting universities if they use words like sustainability or diversity or inclusion. So we are not that far away that these funny things could become something that could be prosecuted from public systems, and that's why it's so relevant to keep together in that international way. And I wanted also to mention another important thing that it hasn't been mentioned, which is that research shows that at least in the European case, kids are reached by massive online pornography around when they are 8 years old. So we have informal sexuality education through pornography, massive pornography, something with no precedence in history, and that is like on the other extreme of what comprehensive sexuality education is, something that is particularly important for this creation of the universe. And to finish the experiences, we have 𝐤𝐄𝐝𝐿, who is the executive director for Education as a Vaccine in Nigeria. It's an organization focused on advancing the rights of adolescents and young people and their development using innovative approaches. And she's going to talk about comprehensive sexuality education programs with a youth center and global south perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. I don't have a presentation, but I think it works out well because I don't also now have a lot of time. So I'll try. And of course, a lot of things have been said. Being the last speaker, I have that advantage. But to sort of set a small context about our work in Nigeria, we do have comprehensive sexuality education, but that's not what it is called. Ours is called family life and health education. It's also very much abstinence-based. It is said to be integrated across various subjects, so it's not a standalone subject of its own to be taught in schools. It's also taught in juniors and senior secondary schools. But for us and the work that we do on the ground, CSE is, of course, an SRHR intervention for us. Our work is around SRHR, but more than that, it's also work that is fostering social transformation, especially because we are targeting young people. And if we want to really see more equitable societies, we need to start talking about, those transformative, we need to start having those transformative conversations at a very young age. So our programs with young people are around, discussing bodily autonomy, personal autonomy, gender equitable norms. We also talking about critical thinking, because it's important that the young people are able to differentiate between what's correct information, what's not correct information, because now everybody has access to information across various channels. So as we are engaging young people, we are also talking about, what the things they can use to test information that they come across to know whether this is really factual or not, especially when it comes to talking about their bodies, talking about gender issues and so on. So we work a lot in schools, but like I said earlier, there is a curriculum that is embedded across subjects, but we're not teachers, right? That's what teachers are delivering, but we have to then find other ways to support that work, because the time that they even have to discuss this subjects or these topics in school is very limited because of the kind of curriculum that we have generally, as the education curriculum and all the other things they have to talk about. So there's other ways, right? There's other social opportunities within school settings still, such as clubs. I don't know if that exists in other countries and contexts, but we have like clubs. They're supposed to be social gatherings or social events, but it's still within the it's still within the school setting. It's chaperoned by teachers. But we do have space there to engage with young people, because then in those kinds of clubs, they can have more dialogues, they can have more conversations than they would be able to have in a 40-minute period of a lesson, a traditional lesson. So we use those opportunities to then talk about, especially if it's the health club or the climate club or, those different clubs. We use those opportunities to bring up these conversations and these topics. We are not, of course, able to cover like a comprehensive, curriculum, but then we can touch on some key topics and subjects that can, that, of course, that are interesting to the young people, that's interest them, especially around relationships and gender norms and those kinds of things. Even though those sessions are structured, it's a little bit more informal, because the settings are also a bit more informal, but it remains an open space for discussions, and it allows more time for the kind of conversations that we have with them. And like I said, it's chaperoned by teachers. Teachers also need training. So we also work with teachers and do some trainings with teachers on even how they deliver their lessons. So in Nigeria, we also have like what we call morning assembly. And for morning assembly, this is a gathering of students before they go to their classes. And it's usually a time that, teachers and, the staff use to talk about other things that are important to the school that can't be said within those classroom periods. So we've also worked with teachers to support their assembly talks and the notes preparations for their assembly talks, so that they use those opportunities as well to continue to pass on information that is empowering and information that helps to, foster more equitable relationships and behavior among the students in the schools. Some of the sessions that we've had, they've been very impactful, right? They are enabling students to recognize gender-based violence, even report forms of gender-based violence. They're helping students to seek support. For example, if they're having, some people it's menstrual, it could be the menstrual health issues. It could be just, whatever issues they have a bit more opening to seek support for that, because they know that it's okay to do that and they can actually seek support. They are also understanding power dynamics in relationships. And one of the things that we try to do in those short sessions is also, help to deconstruct the common and very patriarchal notions that we have in our own communities around relationships, and support them to think about what helps them to make informed decisions around relationships and around bodily autonomy. we also work with parents, and for what we do with parents is we've also had this kinds of things where government has come out and say, oh, we can't support this. That happened like 3 years ago in 2022. A Minister of Education actually came out and said and made a statement around sex education was what he said at the time. And we see that one of the things that happens when, there's more public outreach around these things is that parents are afraid, right? So the people who put out this very negative narratives based on a lot of falsehood, they are inspiring fear and apprehension, among parents. And so parents are afraid because parents themselves don't even know what's in the curriculum. They don't know, some of these things, and they are not sure of what we're saying. So we work with parents and we engage them to challenge these negative narratives. So we've also done dialogues, but we also have forums that are called parent-teacher associations in schools. And we try to, show up at PTA meetings and, ask for a slot, ask for a space to talk about general topics around, how their adolescents are doing with them, their relationships, communication with, their adolescents, and linking it all to, the importance of being a supportive support structure and having a supportive environment for adolescents to thrive. So in the way these conversations are framed, it sort of helps your parents to understand, well, of course, it's not everybody, but a lot of people have a bit more comfort, in understanding what it is that these conversations are about. And maybe when they even hear our names or hear our organizations, they are not like, who, these people. Some are like, oh, we've heard about them, we know them, we've interacted with them. And so it's important for us as well to engage parents, engage teachers, engage young people, because what happens is as we're tackling this whole the space and what it looks like with putting out the facts, putting out information, when people then interact with falsehood, they can check if that is something they agree with or not, versus just interacting with this without anything to fact check, if you would say that. We're also using social media and empowering young people to use social media and to be creative, like creative posts, creative space, like we support them to host like spaces on X, have conversations and stuff like that around just putting out that right narrative so that people let go of their apprehensions, hopefully, around CSE, and they're better able to engage with each other. Some of this work that we do in Nigeria is supported by UNFPA, and we have other partners who also support, other aspects of this work. We've had our own share of attacks and, groups. We've had people go to our website, screenshots, reports of our activities, screenshots like, titles of our activity, put it on social media and say, these organizations are supporting LGBT rights. We've had, people, but what I've seen in the last few years, and I can maybe tie that a bit to this work around putting out the facts and engaging people to put out the facts, is that by the time those things are out there, there's not much traction because people can either identify with us already because they have heard or known or seen, the work somewhere, or it's, by the time they really maybe dig deep, I don't think people dig deep that much, but if they do, they can actually come in contact with what is more accurate than the falsehood that these people put out. So that sort of provides a buffer for us, and as we continue to do that work, so that their intention of inciting public outrage towards us, kind of fizzles within a very short while. Just lastly, to summarize, and this summer we're actually launching the program that we want to just host only during holidays and long vacations. We're calling it Light of My Dreams. And we want to cover various aspects of young people's health and well-being and development, including even financial literacy, vocational skills, digital education, and so on. But the center of that program for us is really the CSE that we're going to be doing in the sessions. And as much as we might not have the time to deliver this curriculum in the way the international guidance has put out, there are key things in there that we want to talk about: power, relationships, the negative gender norms, and shifting that narrative, having conversations with young people about the kind of adults they want to be, the kind of, for example, with the what we do with the boys and the men, the kind of man I want to be, and questioning what they have understood about power and relations around power. And we believe that that's critical if we're going to tackle hate speech, hate culture, and all of that, because young people need to start with themselves and understand how they want to relate with the people around them. And that way, we might maybe build a larger generation, or a generation of young people who understand the need to coexist with other people, even if they were different from them, in a way that is respectful, in a way that is affirming, in a way that really supports individuals to be themselves and coexist with others, even if they were different. So that we can see more young people maybe growing up in this notion of a better culture of equality, of equity, and understanding each other, rather than what this anti-gender groups are pushing, which is a culture of like hate and what's it called, amplifying differences and so on, and using that as a basis to create like all these narratives around gender and push back on all the positives and all the impact that we can actually get from CSE. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lillian. Thank you also for the work that you're doing in Africa. Is one of the places where it's more evident that the absence of comprehensive sexuality education is deadly. And just to finish, we have the conclusions and final remarks by Jenica Brown, who is the coordinator of the Women's Major Group. She has over a decade of experience. Here. In international development with a specialization in gender and inclusion. Thank you very much.
Okay, I know we're hungry, so I'm going to make this really quick. I think just by closing off and saying that you're making it very clear that comprehensive sexuality education is not an ideology, right? We heard from Edouard and from others here that it is evidence-backed methodologies and curriculums that are an essential tool to fulfill the 2030 agenda. I think we heard from Dawn that the need is still stark. 44% of women still can't make informed choices around contraception, who they have sex with and with whom, and their healthcare. And I think that really drives home. And if we zoom in, there's probably way more stark inequalities based on their intersectionalities, right? But I think the evidence is already there, and we have to make sure that others are able to comprehend the way that comprehensive sexuality education is not just a way to reduce inequalities and health, to prevent sexually transmitted infections, to build, informed and respectful relationships with our bodies and within relationships. But it's a direct entry point, as my colleague was saying, into building a rights-based way of thinking and into building critical citizenships. And so I think it's a chicken and egg situation where it's both one of the tools, because if they are multi-headed dogs like the ones from Harry Potter, then we have to become octopuses with all the different strategies to combat harmful ideology. So everything that we're not filling with this, with our vision and with the evidence base that we have, they fill with their hate and their myths and their harmful ideology. And I think let's really end there, that, the pushback is real and it's coordinated, but so is our response. And this is a really an essential tool to fulfill the 2030 agenda and build better lives. And so let's move forward on this together. And let's go eat.
Yeah, thank you.